In this video, we're going to learn how spontaneous oxidation and reduction reactions can be used to generate electricity. In this overall redox reaction here, we can see that it's the copper metal that is undergoing an oxidation reaction as copper metal reacts to form the Cu2 plus ion and therefore lose 2 electrons. Those 2 electrons are then picked up by 2 silver ions, which then gain those 2 electrons in order to form silver metal, thus constituting the reduction half reaction. Now, because the combined voltage of each of these half reactions is positive, these 2 reactions are therefore spontaneous and can therefore be used to generate electrical power. Now, when these reactions are organized in a specific structure that allows the flow of electrons from one reaction to the other to generate power, this device that we have made is what we call an electrochemical cell. Now, a device that is used to generate electrical power to power other electronic devices, such as a computer or a phone, that sounds a lot like a battery. That's because electrochemical cells are the foundations behind how batteries work, and even if they have slightly different structures, they function basically the same way, and all electrochemical cells and batteries share a few common components that allow them to function, the most important of which are what we call electrodes. So the electrodes, which are here and here within this electrochemical cell, are the 2 locations where each of our half reactions occur. So the half reaction that occurs at this electrode happens to be the oxidation reaction. So the name of this electrode where an oxidation reaction occurs is what we call the anode, whereas the reduction reaction would occur at a different electrode, which is what we call the cathode. Meaning that if we apply these terms to the reduction and oxidation reactions from the cell we want to make, because the copper reaction is undergoing oxidation, it will occur at the anode of our battery, whereas the silver reaction would occur at the cathode of the battery. So the easiest way to understand how an electrochemical cell generates power is actually to use an example and watch the flow of electrons and ions to show how power would be generated. So at the anode of a battery, we will almost always have a solid electrode made out of the metal that undergoes an oxidation reaction, in this case copper. Now, once the reaction commences, the 2 electrons from copper would be separated from the metal, causing an ion to form, in this case Cu2+. Now, 2 things. Cu2+ basically cannot exist unless it is immersed within a solution, and because it has a positive charge cannot stably exist by itself unless we have negative charge to balance it. Therefore, each of the solid electrodes is going to be immersed within electrolyte, that being an electrically conductive solution, and the electrolyte is going to contain negative ions in order to balance out each of the charges. So in this case, let's just write the electrolyte here. We don't need to write water because it's understood that water is the basis of this solution, but we need a counter ion that can balance out this charge. One common counter ion that is used is nitrate, because all nitrates are soluble in water, so we wouldn't get copper nitrate precipitating out of the solutions. Now, if we take a look at what happens with the electrons from the oxidation reaction are going to move from the anode where they are released to the cathode where they are absorbed through this connecting wire here, which again is literally what we call a connecting wire. Now, the idea of the connecting wire is that the flow of electrons actually generates what we call a current. For people with a good physics background, current is the unit of measurement that measures the rate of flow of electrons from one location to another location, and it's this current that we can use in order to generate power. So some sort of electrical device can be attached to the connecting wire, and as the electrons move from the anode to the cathode, the flow of electrons can be used to power that device. Now, once the electrons make it to the cathode, remember that the silver reaction here actually involves the opposite process. It would involve aqueous silver ions absorbing electrons from the copper reaction, and then those would precipitate out of solution as solid silver, thus expanding the size of the solid silver electrode like this. And it's this flow of electrons from copper that loses them to silver ions that gains them that causes this current to form, and therefore allows this reaction to generate power. Now, there are a few considerations that we need here. Number one, remember that each of our solutions is immersed in an electrolyte, or each of our electrodes, rather, is immersed within an electrolyte. The problem is that if we watch what happens to our ion concentrations, we see that the concentration of copper ions is going to constantly increase as this reaction continues, while conversely, the concentration of silver ions as they absorb electrons is going to constantly decrease. This means that the concentration of ions at either electrode location is not going to remain constant, and therefore we need a way to take the increasing positive charge that we have here and the increasing negative charge that we have here, because as the concentration of silver decreases, the amount of positive charge we have decreases, meaning that the amount of negative charge is going to become stronger and stronger, and therefore we need to delocalize or get these charges to diffuse so that our battery doesn't build up a high amount of charge in either location. And for that, each of the electrodes or each of the electrolyte solutions is connected by a connection that we call a salt bridge. Now, a salt bridge is not literally a bridge made out of salt. It's usually made out of some non-conductive material like glass or filter paper, but basically it allows the solution to move in either direction, which allows high concentrations of ions on either side to move between either well of electrolyte. And again, the purpose of the salt bridge is to allow ions to pass between each of the electrolytes in order to balance the charge on either side. In the next video, we'll look at how the salt bridge actually functions and how the ion movement is going to happen and why this ion movement is necessary. In conclusion, however, we should take a look at the overall cell voltage here, because of course none of this mechanism would work if our battery does not have a spontaneous reaction. So if we go to our electrochemistry data table here, we can look for the reduction potential and oxidation potential for our anode and cathode, and we can see the reduction of silver is quite strongly spontaneous, while the oxidation of copper will not be spontaneous here. But if we add these total voltages together, remember that the reduction of silver has a voltage of positive 0.8, whereas our oxidation of silver is not spontaneous with a voltage of negative 0.34. So if we subtract one voltage from the other, we can see, after some quick arithmetic here, we can see that our voltage is still positive despite the fact that one of our half reactions is not. And because the overall voltage is still spontaneous, that means that our reaction will occur, which means that this electrochemical cell will functionally generate power.